Good morning.
Morning.
Season 2, episode 1.
Yeah, first episode of 2021, and we seem to be following the calendar year rather than the school year, even though it's a teaching show.
Yeah, I think that's okay. Seasonal. We have the summer off and maybe do some other things, and then
Maybe we can
Christmas.
do a mid-season, have the summer off, and I don't know. We're figuring this out as we go. So it's
We are.
technically season 2, episode 1, or episode 24 if you're following the whole thing.
Yeah, great. What's the mug?
My usual, it's the Little Prince. It's one of my. I only have 3 or 4 mugs.
So I found one. It looks boring, and then you realize it's a Scrabble mug, and on the back it shows
All
the letter distribution, and at the bottom,
it looks boring, but it's actually really nerdy.
Yeah, at the bottom when you finish drinking, it says triple word score in the red symbol.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, my wife is amazing at Scrabble.
Oh, yeah?
Amazing. Yeah.
I'm not very good at Scrabble. I never got into it. And there's a friend we have in common who once actually just made me realize how much I never understood anything about Scrabble, but it didn't make me any more interested in it.
I'm really good with words, but I'm not great at Scrabble.
Well, that was the first person they said, no, Scrabble's not about words. What a silly idea. It's about making points.
I think that's why my wife is good at it.
Yeah. It's about scoring points. It's about knowing by heart the list of 2-letter words that are acceptable in Scrabble. And it's about just bunching up the scoreboard, the score as much as you can. So you concentrate. You don't like spread out.
No, it's definitely about word placement on the board.
To make points with as little tiles as possible. And having the Scrabble dictionary learned by heart or something.
And what's your t-shirt today?
So I am wearing this hoodie that I have worn before, but not to show what was on the hoodie. So this is my, actually, so I got it. So on the front is only the rest of the pattern is on the back. But obviously this is a red cup with a hammer and sickle, obviously. And on the back is, wait, I have to do this. Wait, can you see?
Yeah. It looks like lefties having a party. Is that Mao, Lenin, Karl Marx?
So it's
Guevara.
It's the Communist Party.
Oh my God, how come I didn't see that? Very good.
They have red cups and they're drunk and they're partying because it's the Communist Party.
That red cup thing is a real American drinking beer.
Totally. This is a big American drinking thing, yeah. Student drinking thing. I never partook into that. And actually, funnily enough, I started seeing some red cups in France.
Oh, interesting.
Well, partly, I think, down to the fact that some bars were still allowed to open this summer and doing takeout had to have some kind of plastic cups, and some of them had red cups. Wow. And in the US at festivals, I guess, but most of the places I've been to in Chicago had transparent cups. Or other places I go to have Eco Cups, which is a brand, I believe. It's a hard plastic cup that is reusable that you buy. You buy the cup and then you can have it refilled or keep it. It's not meant to be thrown away. It's meant to be recycled.
Oh, nice. That is a good hoodie.
Yeah, it's a great hoodie. Thank you.
It's a good hoodie. I
wear it a lot.
And I think I wore this before. Did I wear this before?
I'm not sure. I'm soon at the end of my collection of stuff to show you in terms of t-shirts. I don't think I'm going to make it through the whole second season.
Oh, this t-shirt is the one. So this one is the artwork from 9 Inch Nails album, The Downward Spiral, because they were recently voted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame.
I remember you mentioning that in our last or penultimate episode. I can't remember.
Yeah, because I was talking about the music from Soul, which was
that's right. Trent Reznor, Atticus, and I also learned that all the jazz arrangements were composed by John Batiste, I know him because I know of him because I tend to watch the Daily Show with Stephen Colbert.
Okay.
I watch the opening monologues and bits and pieces on YouTube. I don't watch the whole show, and he's the main music guy.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, and he's
I
cool.
do like that show.
So they you know, he's cool and has a lot of good stuff. And I don't really know much of his career beyond what he does on the TV show, but I know he does a bunch of stuff. And probably being on the TV show has given him more opportunities for sure, you know.
Yeah, I think that, and this is one of my favorite albums. It's not a very happy album, but it's a very, very, very good album. I think it's not just about music. In my opinion, it's artistry. It's everything, the artwork, the music, the whole concept. It is definitely a concept album, but everything about it.
I'm not sure I've listened to it. Maybe I should at some point. Yeah.
Possibly, but it's very dark.
Or maybe not now.
Yeah, not at the beginning of the year.
I just said before we started recording that it was like in a bit of a January blues. The week coming back from Christmas holidays and the first week of the year and this year, that's a mix of stuff where I'm like, I don't know what to look forward to for the year, what I should focus on, where I should put my energy, what I can or should create. Can I create? I don't have anything in my schedule. I don't have nothing in my schedule, but I don't have much. Mm-hmm. And I was talking about that with a friend yesterday. It's also true that while there's circumstances to the year of, you know, curfews and not being able to plan any travels, or the ski resorts closing down. So I was hoping to get maybe a bit of skiing in, all that stuff. Not much going in terms of job opportunities for me. No visibility on any kind of income. So the worries about where I live, what my rent is, all that kind of stuff has resurfaced, which is not the first time in the past year. That compounds with like your usual January blues. And at the same time, there's a lot of the things that I should be doing that technically have no bearing over whether I can go to the restaurant or skiing. Like I can and should, or feel like I should be writing more stuff in my blog and doing more to promote this podcast and looking for gigs and it's all that stuff that are projects that I can keep focusing on, or I should be able to anyway. But I spend time worrying about other stuff and less time doing that, I suppose. But also just the first week being back from holidays and family, it's you know, and unfortunately the weekend was beautiful weather, but during the week was really cold, dreary.
Yeah, it doesn't help.
Cold in my apartment. It's, you know.
Yeah. Well, maybe this episode will help kickstart something. We'll see. Right. The only reason that I've had to get myself organized is because I've been remote teaching this entire week. So.
Oh yeah, you have. That's right. I can. What do you use for remote teaching? Yeah, you're in full on lockdown. I wouldn't be surprised if we follow you in that. But I mean, I've been remote teaching since October, so. But I'm not full time teaching. I have very little teaching time at the moment. December and January was very little. I have very little hours in terms of teaching, paid teaching time. I finished my grading, so I was busy a bit with grading this week because I hadn't done it over the holidays, or haven't done half of it. Now I'm chasing the stuff that is still due.
You are such a teacher. You're in the world of teaching.
I am. I'm not. There are things that I like about it, because I was going to say I'm really not enjoying it. There are things that I like about it. I really at this point don't think I want to be a full-time teacher. If anything, I'm like, okay, I really need to find some other kind of work, like my actual job. I would love to keep some teaching. I'd love to do that. Because I think it's really great to be in contact with students, but I don't think I want to make it my full-time job. Or conversely, if ever it was my full-time job, then I wouldn't be worrying about any other sources of income and I could spend my time on it. And then I would still have all the complaints that teachers have about, like, oh my God, you know, like what I'm going through at the moment. Like I'm chasing some work that is due to me for grades, and some students are like, well, you haven't graded me. You graded all my classmates. Is there anything wrong? And I'm like, well, yeah. See, back to the conversation we were just having about how you didn't deliver the work.
Yeah.
And I'm kind of like trying to give you more time to do it. That was the implicit thing. But if you really want to be explicit about it, now I'm like, well, do I grade according to the work that's been given, or do I wait for new work now that you're insisting? I don't know what to do. And I'm too nice, clearly. I'm like, all right, well, I don't want to
Yeah.
put any zeros, but at some point I'm going to have to give consequences, which I don't want to do, but
And it doesn't matter how old they are. Well, actually, it doesn't matter whether it's, in my opinion, it still happens in a work situation. It's the same thing. Unless there's consequences, then people just won't do it. Like the whole thing about getting an email and saying, can I have it as soon as possible? I'm just not going to do it. But if someone emails me and says it needs to be done by this date at this time, suddenly I'm way more likely to do it because I can plan it and I know exactly when it has to be done by.
Yeah, and I was a little bit too lenient on that. Well, possibly. But I also decided, and I'm going to make clear, but that's my own way of deciding things. I made choices, right? That I'm not focused, like I'm not teaching them doing things on time.
Right, yes.
If that makes sense.
Yeah, it does.
And I'm like, you know what, that's not what
they've got to initiate, they've got to generate themselves.
Yeah, so it also goes to show that at some point, I just have to grade accordingly, even though I didn't really want to do that, and I just wanted to be nice about it and give them more chance. But also some of them, I mean, the ones I'm talking about, whatever their circumstances, and some of them have circumstances, of course, but unfortunately, the circumstances don't matter at some point. And when you're working, and this isn't like this, some of them are like, guys, you don't realize at all. Everything of what we're doing right now is just so not acceptable in a professional environment.
Have you said
that? Not yet, because I've just been thinking it this week. So next time I see them, I'm going to mention it.
Yeah.
Or for anybody who watches it, they'll have heard it, I guess. I will mention it because I feel it's important to be said. But also that I'm not. That's not like I'm teaching them a specific thing of communication, and I'm like, I'm not going to teach you being on time. Surely somebody else is going to. Well, you should have integrated that, or somebody else is going to do it, and not me, basically, or nobody. But so anyway, yeah, probably very very teacher stuff.
It is, well, and it's good. The other one more thing before I get to the question is that I realized, and my wife has realized it because we're sharing the same office, and I'm teaching. There are so many things we do as teachers and what we do every day and the working day of a teacher and the working life of a teacher that are transferable. So many things. And people don't realize that. People have an opinion about what teaching is like because they went through the education system. And then actually seeing and understanding what teachers do, wow, there's way more to it.
Yeah,
way
there's
more
a lot to it. It's a huge, big job, and I kind of knew because I'd heard from teachers before, and realizing it, or like experiencing it rather, is a big deal.
But I'm really, really clear about separating work and not work, or work and play, or work and home.
Yeah, we talked about this before a little bit.
Because teaching is definitely one of those jobs that can easily take over your entire life.
Yeah, totally.
And you become everything. Work becomes everything. And I definitely don't want to be one of those teachers. And I know colleagues like that. And I'm just like, nah, that's not who I am. So we'll get to the question. But I do want to say, I think that when we talked about this, maybe on an episode, I can't remember where we talked about it, but the idea of, yes, we'll take a question from a pupil and we'll explore it, but we'll also link it to and explore it with whatever we're reading.
Yep.
So I was planning on reading 20 books in 2021 because I read 20 books in 2020. But I thought, forget that. It doesn't make any sense. Let me just do 21 in 2021.
That's great.
So
I think if I did 12, it would be good for me as an objective. I don't know if I should take a realistic objective or not unrealistic. I've not read, actually, how many books have I read last year? It's going to be an embarrassing number. I don't even know if I want to tell you.
Well, while you're looking, the thing that made the huge difference, I read 8 books in 2018 and then 18 in 2019. What made the difference is changing my signature on my email to currently reading and just finished. Because then I was like, I have to change it. So I have to read. I want to look good for the people I'm emailing, whoever gets my email. So I'm going to make sure I read. And that's what started it. It was a ridiculous thing like that. And then now I'm like, I have to read.
Okay,
Otherwise,
so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7,
pretty
8,
good.
9, 10, 11. The other ones I haven't finished.
I thought you were going to say 12 for a book a month. That would have been good.
Well, I guess it depends if we count like graphic novels like this big, then I probably can add a couple more.
Well, it's a book, isn't it?
Yeah, I have to double count. There's a few. I'm finishing the Sandman series, but I read a couple last year. But yeah, 11's not that bad.
No.
I probably did read a couple more that I need to double check. Actually, so yeah, I'm not as bad as I thought it was. And several of those are pretty big books. Like we're talking 2,000-page novels.
Oh. Are you still reading Thinking Fast and Slow?
Yeah, I still am. Yeah,
that's
I'm
a
halfway
big
through.
book.
It is a big book. I'm not reading it very fast.
So how many are you going to read this year? 12 sounds good. One book a month.
12 is like totally doable. Now that I was just at least 12. But now I'm wondering maybe I should have a bigger challenge. But then again, I'm starting to the year playing video games a lot more than I'm reading. So let's say 12.
Yeah, let's go.
I could up to 15, but let's start with 12. It
12.
also really depends what kind of book I'm reading, because I know, and not to take anything away, because some of the books that we're reading are really great, but some of the nonfiction books of the ones that we discussed, like Deep Focus is one, The Shallows probably is another one. Deep Work, sorry. You read that really fast.
Yes.
You know, I read Big Magic from Elizabeth Gilbert. I read it in 2 days. That's super fast to read. Whereas Thinking Fast and Slow, that's like each chapter is fortunately short. They did it, but it's dense. So like, all right, I read one chapter and then leave it for a bit.
It's true. But I'm definitely going to read more fiction. I didn't read much fiction last year, so I'm going to I decided 6 fiction, 15 non-fiction.
Okay.
So let's go into the question, and then we'll come back. We
can give each other recommendations and talk about books.
Excellent. So today's question: could I study one thing and then get a completely different job?
Well, yes, you most probably will.
I think, but the second bit of the answer, I think, is the key bit. You most probably will. Some of my students tend to think if they study certain A levels, so in the UK system, they pick 3 or 4 subjects to kind of semi-specialize, maybe humanities, maybe science, like whatever. And that guides their choice for university.
Sure.
So somebody does history, English, and drama, they're not going to do chemistry at uni. So it doesn't make any sense, because A levels get you ready for university studies.
Sure, there is some bearing on it, of course.
Yeah.
But then again, also everybody who has a master or a degree in chemistry doesn't mean you're going to be a chemist.
Well, yeah. But what's interesting is my students tend to think that in a very linear way.
But that's how they've been taught their whole lives, and that's how governments organize institutional education. In France too, I was looking this week because I've reopened, and as I said, there's been a lot of recurring conversations in my head and spoken this week as I came back. I came back home on Monday. And one of them being, over the holidays, somebody got in touch, reached out by email that was in touch with me in August, September. Anyway, offered me a course to teach with another school, the Burgundy School of Business. I think I could say, yeah.
You did. To me, you did, but not on here.
Yeah, not on here. Anyway, it was like, well, can I say this publicly? Well, I don't think it matters. I haven't signed any NDAs or anything. And I didn't get the job, so it doesn't matter. But we're going back and forth. I was going to take the job. And then he says, oh, wait a minute. Do you have a master's? I'm like, no, I don't have a master's. Oh, then we can't teach with us.
Seriously?
Yeah. The school requires the teachers, even if they're teaching for one course, like a few weeks, to have a master's degree.
What?
that's like, you can also go back to our conversation about should I get a master's?
Yeah, I'm
and it will be law
shocked.
in France soon. So the school, this is a private school, but that is state acknowledged, etc. And there is a law project that is currently in the works that was supposed to go into effect this January, but because of COVID is pushed back a year or maybe further, saying that if you are going to teach any kind of level, you need to have a diploma of that level.
What's diploma mean?
Oh, a degree.
A degree. Okay, fine.
So if you're going to teach a master's class, you need to have a master's degree.
Okay. Regardless of your experience, regardless of what
regardless of your experience, some schools can do whatever they want. I believe like some private schools can do whatever they want. I think like the one I'm teaching at for communications and advertising, even though I'm teaching master's students, they didn't require me to have a master's, but I have like so much experience within the area.
Yeah.
Obviously this was a branding and marketing class as well. So it's, it's not like and I gave it to a friend. Well, I gave the tip about the job to a friend of mine, who of course was like, she's like, well, it's ridiculous. I was like, but you do have a master's degree. She's like, yeah, I have a master's degree in arts. It has no bearing on my job as a brand strategist that I've been doing for ages. I didn't learn that at school. I learned that on the job. But I was like, that doesn't matter. The paperwork says you need a master's and you have a master's. It's a master's in art. Doesn't matter.
This is very interesting because
anyway,
students,
sorry, go ahead.
The students definitely think in a very linear way, consistent with what they've been taught in school. And then I think they think their career is going to be very linear, although that's beginning to change. And I think as they get older, as they move into thinking about university, they are beginning to realize it doesn't really matter what your degree is when it comes to a career necessarily, unless it's something like medicine or vets.
And these are things that we mentioned before. There's also, so there's the big area, the elephant in the room is that life doesn't happen in a linear fashion.
Yes.
But we like to think it does, and all the structures around us as kids teach us that it does. But it isn't. It's not linear. So just to finish my story, this week, one of the recurring things I was like, well, I don't have a master's, so maybe I should look back what I had started before everything got locked down in the spring last year. I was looking at getting an equivalency for a degree because there are government programs that there are French government programs that say, if you have this much professional experience, you can get a equivalent degree.
Oh, okay.
Right. But this is all operating within the world of education and government, but they don't speak necessarily the same language as what they're calling the certifying bodies, which is basically the universities, who have a different language of academia and all sorts of other requirements. And so the government then touts that for communication, unemployment reasons, for getting people trained and skilled up, and having a rhetoric that, well, they have a database of jobs and job titles, and if you're a student, you're going to be looking at, all right, what should I study to aim for this particular job? And there's websites that explain in a very linear fashion that, to be able to get to this job, you need to get this degree, this thing, this step, which doesn't happen that way in reality. Now, it might happen for some people, but the thing is, it happens for the person. Well, it's been thought up in a linear fashion for the people who think up those kinds of programs. And it's not just one person, it's a whole body of people thinking, okay, well, how are we going to communicate and organize this thing called there's a pathway to jobs. That we need to communicate, that we need to tell students that, so that we have a common language of everybody. But in reality, it doesn't match what happens in the workplace, or even what happens in the education institutions and universities or whatever, or other types of schools, specialist schools. Not always, sometimes, but this, I think, when my comment is particularly true for the vast majority of jobs that exist that we still have in the service industry, I guess, or like whatever we want to call it, even though it's
information working, information economy,
information working, information economy. But in the same way that to be a veterinarian, I can't say the word.
Just say vet.
the vet, or a plumber. You need to
Yeah.
have like some technical training at some point, regardless of what degrees you have. Ironically, it's probably better to have a master's degree, even if you're going to be a plumber. Because, well, only because, and this is back to, we can listen to the whole conversation about should I get a master's degree. If you have an opportunity to have to do a master's degree, you probably should, because otherwise you might find yourself in my kind of situation where you're like, it's stupid. Should I do it? Spending a lot of time and energy doing it. And I exchanged an email with, because I received a letter that I needed to exchange. Well, not anyway. Tell me I should I'm signed up to unemployment services.
Okay.
I don't get benefits, but I'm technically still looking for work, so I'm signed up with the service. And so I received a letter about it saying that I'm still signed up to unemployment services, so I should contact my advisor. And I was like, just looking at those things to like, should I look for an equivalency again? And it's the beginning of the year, so I thought, okay, I'll write an email to the because they hadn't updated my resume in a while, my CV, because I barely use their website portal because it doesn't really have much for me. I use LinkedIn. So anyway, and of course the person said, oh yeah, that you should totally do that, because their answer to anybody not finding work is to train.
Right.
And training can be to go back to education, to get equivalency. So you're doing something. I'm not saying it's a bad answer. It's not a bad answer necessarily.
Yeah.
But it's also, on one hand, why not go study again? On another hand, it's just complicated to navigate how to do it.
Yes.
And what I should spend my time and energy on. So, for example, the school that I work with has equivalencies, and I have a call tomorrow to talk about that. But they have equivalencies with something of a training, what's called a training certificate, that is equivalent to a master's degree, but it's not a master's degree.
Okay.
So, for example, I'm like, well, wait a minute. So, and this would cost money and time.
Yeah.
So is this, and I'm still not sure. I suspect not. So it was like, well, if it's equivalent to a master's degree, but it's not a master's degree, should I pursue a master's degree, or is this thing enough?
Yeah. Wow.
Because usually if you have something that is equivalent, it's not the actual thing.
Yeah. But
I suspect.
Isn't it enough on your CV to say you have the equivalent of a master's degree for someone who's interested in things that are required?
I think the test is going to be the test that will be interesting, and I haven't gotten around to do that. I've been thinking of it the last few days, is to email my contact from the other school who required a master's degree and check in and say, and ask, like, wait a minute, if I had this equivalency, would that match, or would that not meet the requirement? Because if it doesn't meet the requirement, then there's no point in doing it.
Mm-hmm. And by the way, episode 7 is where we talk about should you get a master's degree. So because listening to you, I'm thinking, oh, should I? And I would like to eventually, but certainly for my younger colleagues, they have a master's degree. And certainly for most of my, there's kind of different, to go back to the question about, do you get hang on, let me get the actual question. Could I study one thing and then get a completely different job? There are people out of my colleagues, certainly, teachers who tend to go from university straight into teaching, and the subject they teach matches what they did at uni.
Sure.
And they're like career teachers. And in my opinion, they don't all, depending on the subject, they don't always make as good teachers as people who've done other things before coming to teaching.
They don't have enough life experience.
Yeah, that's what I think.
I mean, just other stuff.
But it depends on the subject. Sure. If it's a subject like I teach business, I teach psychology, I think having worked and having had a career and doing something else helps my teaching understanding of business. But for a subject like physics, I don't know that it would make any difference. Unless you spent time, I don't know, or chemistry working at AstraZeneca. And then a statistician.
Maybe it would make a difference in terms of your other skills that make you a good teacher. Interpersonal, or, but that's a different question.
I never thought of that. That possibly,
Yeah, because if you go look at other places in the world, you have an appreciation that is different than the one that you only stuck into academia.
Yeah,
That's to each his own. And you might be a really, really, like really strong physics researcher, but it doesn't mean you're a great teacher. And but
True.
And the other thing is that it doesn't even matter, because most of the great physics researchers in university, it doesn't matter if you're a good teacher or not. That's not what you're rated on. Just like the comments in deep work, deep work.
Yeah, deep work. Yeah, you're right. Yeah, that's true. Just because you could be really, really intelligent in an area, a subject area, but be appalling as a teacher. And there are so many other things that go with teaching.
It unfortunately wouldn't matter as a teacher, as long as you publish great articles and you do research for the university that you work for.
Oh, hang on. Are you talking about teaching or lecturing?
Oh, what's the difference?
Well, teacher tends to be in a school setting. Lecturer would be in a higher education setting. So if you're lecturing at university, they don't really care about your.
That's what I was talking about.
Yeah, I realized that. Whereas in a school with younger people, they really care what's happening in the classroom.
Oh yeah, sure.
So with this question, my degree is half business, half psychology. If I hadn't. And that has a direct relevance to what I'm teaching as a teacher. But
I studied cinema at university. It has nothing to do with what I'm doing now.
Yeah.
Most people, just like the friend I mentioned, has the master's in arts.
Yeah.
And they work at the same job I do in advertising. They're a brand strategist.
I think everything you said reminds me of, and you've read it, I haven't, of the Harare's book. Is it 21 Essays for the 21st Century?
21 Lessons for the 21st Century.
21 Lessons. And he writes all about the education system, doesn't he?
Not so much.
Doesn't he?
A little bit in there, but there's I did mention the talk he had with Russell Brand about education with students in London at King's College, I think.
Because I'm sure I read an excerpt from that book.
Maybe. It's possible he talks about, what were you thinking? Because I can't remember.
So I was thinking that because I read an excerpt from that book in Wired magazine, where he talks about the education system. There's a mismatch between the education system as it is and the careers that are required. And
we talked about this before.
And that's everything you said reminds me of that conversation we had.
Yeah, and that's a whole other point that I wanted to broach for sure, which is one. So there are career paths, of course, where certain studies are more useful than others, and it's great if you have an idea on that, for sure. But there's also the vast majority of people don't have a job that is necessarily tied into what your degree is, also because your degree is about if you take your degree or if you take your studies, it's generally practicing your brain, cramming and learning a lot of different stuff that you're learning to learn, and that you will be, because that's why the institution of education is there in the first place, or from a certain perspective, is to make you good little ants in the society and colony. You know, like what we talked at the beginning, I should probably be a lot stricter on giving stuff back on time, because they will be more useful as employees to give stuff on time than they would be as thinkers, which is what I'm trying to teach them.
Right.
Now, this is it's arguably a cynical perspective, but it's not only cynical, it's also quite realistic about a certain amount of how the world we live in functions. And the vast majority of jobs that are available, that I think the majority of your kinds of students will do, or a lot of different people, myself included, don't have much bearing on what you actually studied, besides the fact that you learned how to study, that you're a little bit smart, that you learned how to do some research, and you learn how to do things on time, that otherwise you get slapped in the finger and you're going to have some consequences. And the vast majority of well, not vast majority, but some of the big topics, like you just said, business, you know, if you go study economics and business, which a lot of people go and study because they don't know what else to, or at least it was true in my time, so I don't know if it's still true, but I know that a lot of people that went to, they're like, I don't know what to study, so I guess I'm just going to go study economic and social thing, which seems to be an umbrella for a lot.
You've absolutely hit the nail on the head. So many people will go and study business management because they have no idea what they want to do.
Yeah.
And
And
there's
that's not a job. That's just everything.
Yeah, and there's a certain, I'm going to go on a slight tangent here, but there's a certain cultural expectation. Certainly, I remember my grandmother saying to me, "Do you want to become a doctor?" I was like, "No." "Do you want to become a lawyer?" "No." "I want to do psychology at university." And my grandmother went, "What? Why do you want to study that?" It was that kind of reaction.
That's interesting that wasn't so acceptable. But I get how they would want you to be a doctor or a lawyer, and it's a little stereotypical South Asian or Asian
It is.
altogether.
Now, the interesting thing that you're saying is there is a hierarchy within that stereotypical South Asian thing. Like, doctor, dentist, lawyer, really great.
Yeah.
And then if you can't make the grade with that, I'll go do business.
Sure, but that's a catch-all. Like, you'll find a job somewhere in a big company.
Economics has a bit of a higher percent, or accounting. So it's kind of like that. Then accounting, then like economics.
And I meant economics because in the French meaning, it's slightly different in terms of meaning, and as a subject to choose from, it usually means business. Although, but then it's been replaced since my time because you have all actually businesses, école de commerce, business schools, the business schools that teach you I'm like, what does that mean? Teach you business? Do they even know? I don't think they even know how to sell anything when they walk out of those things. Arguably.
Yeah, that sounds about right. I mean,
they have a lot of complicated models.
Oh yeah,
like Porter's 5 and things like that.
Sorry, which model did you just mention?
Porter's 5 forces.
Oh yeah, I have to teach that. There's bazillions of models, and they're all like quadrants. Oh
yeah, which is great. I use some of them for sure,
and they can be useful because they simplify understanding what can be complicated and allow you to get your head around something. But they're not everything.
That's a lot of what I do in my job anyway. So quadrants is most consultants like this secret weapon because everybody gets impressed with a quadrant.
Yeah, I read that article you sent me about that guy. There was one about a consultant guy.
Oh yeah.
It was very dark, but it was very funny. I'm just going to pull out a quadrant and change everything in the meeting. A model, and they learn those models, and they have a certain amount of usefulness. But the economics is even worse for those kind of theoretical models. But I do think, and again, jumping on another tangent, that Thomas Piketty's book.
I haven't read that yet.
Has and he's French, right? So it's a really, really good book, and I think it's made economics more popular. I do think it's made it more like he's almost like a rock star economist. I don't know if that's too much.
He is a little bit. I think he goes to a lot of shows and a lot of talk shows and not talk shows. I love invited on as a talking head, I guess.
Yeah, I loved his book. I thought it was brilliant.
I should read it.
I haven't read it. He's written another one, but I haven't followed up. But the if you do something like business, it's so broad as to be almost meaningless.
There's also a whole other thing on directly related to the question, which is if you don't know what you want to do, which is I think a lot of people. I didn't know what I wanted to do. I also didn't know what was available. And you don't know what was available, and whatever you think is available is going to be dependent on what you're told in your immediate environment, parents, family, friends, teachers, what you happen to discover when you're doing a little bit of browsing and online research, or back in my day going to the school library,
reading an actual book,
and just like reading some brochures about let's find out what I could do with my life. And so because you don't know, and because everything's changing, all the jobs are changing, that's the Harare type thing that we haven't really got onto just yet. It's normal that you will study one thing for not everybody, but a lot of people will. I don't know if it's a majority or not a majority, but a lot of people will study one thing like a catch-all, like business, because I guess it will be useful whatever I want to do, and I don't know what I want to do, and I need more time to find out while I'm learning. And so at the end, you might discover that you want to do something different. And then there's a whole other thing that we talked about before, and we're going to talk about again for sure, is that increasingly there has been already in our generation more people changing jobs more often, rather than having a steady career. So everything that your parents were saying that you just mentioned, be a doctor or lawyer, is already out of date. It's already out of date. And so more and more people will have more and more types of jobs throughout their career. So changing jobs and changing careers because you need to, because there's big changes in the way the world works. And being a doctor is not an answer to everything. There are tons of doctors that don't make that much money, that work really insane hours. So it's a real vocation. It's fantastic because we need some, but it's not a surefire way to make a lot of money at all.
Yeah, I do remember my dad advising me to choose a job or find a career that has a vocation. You can have a certification, whether it's doctor, lawyer, whatever. But he also talked about accountant, because you have that, you are that, and then also things like plumber, whatever.
But because they're talking about job security, right?
Yes. Yeah,
and that's what a lot of concerns are about. Of parents, a lot of parents, not my parents, are about, like, you should find something that you are secure in.
Yeah, that's exactly where my parents come, especially my dad.
Now, I didn't have parents like that, and I don't come from that kind of environment. So if it's correct for you as the person listening, then great. Not for you, James, just whoever's listening to us.
Yeah.
But I also want to say it's great, but also I think it matches with a certain type of personality, whether how much secure you want to be or how secure you want to be.
Yeah.
And it's not a bad thing, but I also think whatever the job is, there's a lot less security coming in the future, because there's going to be huge swaths of industry that are replaced by robots, whatever happens, or robot assisted.
Assisted. This is interesting because we went a few years ago, it must have been about 4 or 5 years ago, we took the whole GCSE business cohort, we took them to the Mini factory, which is, they make minis, the cars. I think it was just outside Birmingham, I think. And we're in this factory and we're walking around and we see
the robots.
We see the robots doing their thing. And then you see one person like overseeing the robots. And then there was another bit where they had the assembly line, and I can't remember. I was expecting the cars to be moving and the people to be doing stuff, but I think it was the other way around. Like the floor was moving, and they were moving, and the cars were moving. There was something like that.
Did you find out how many people worked there? Actual people? It
was in that factory, a couple of hundred maybe, and they were churning out cars. But what was interesting is they were mass producing cars, but it's this idea of mass customization. So you could pick all the things you wanted in a Mini and have, like, I want these lights, I want this trim, I want the Union Jack on the top, all this kind of stuff. But the guys who were there doing this thing, like this bit as it was moving, it was really intricate stuff. They really had to know what they were doing. It was a proper, like, you couldn't just do it.
Yeah.
But it was interesting seeing the mixture of the big robots doing stuff repeatedly and people. And I guess that's going to become more and more prevalent and spread across more and more industries.
Yeah.
Does he talk about that in Homo Deus, Harare?
Yeah.
Or is it in... He does, because I haven't read that yet.
Yeah, totally. Talks about that a lot. And he talks about that a lot more in all the stuff all the videos. He was very prolific last year. Sorry, in video interviews. There's tons of stuff on YouTube, on his channel.
I did need to watch some of that stuff.
It gets repetitive, of course. So I didn't. Only watched a few because he's just being consistent with what he thinks and repeating it. But of course, a lot more concern last year over what's going on politically in the world, and the rise of authoritarian regimes and anti-freedom laws or limitations of civil liberties, which that is also something, by the way, that I'm very concerned about, generally speaking, as well. But that's a different topic. So back to the question, Am I going to study something and do another job? Another area, whether you study, so there's a whole body of like studying business, and that you can go into all sorts of different jobs that you will have to learn on the job, whatever the company is, because there's specificities of every company and how they work. And they require you to begin with to be kind of just smart enough to understand the training.
Yeah.
And what you're going to be doing, it amounts to some version of sending emails, being in meetings, filling office forms, spreadsheets, maybe a PowerPoint, and being paid for that.
Actually just in a Dilbert cartoon.
Yeah, exactly. Now, and it might sound, I don't mean this, I don't even mean this in a cynical or demeaning way at all. If you look at the vast majority of people working in offices, the content of what I said is different. So they need to be trained on like what goes in the emails and the spreadsheets and the PowerPoints, all that. That's different from one job to another, probably. But ultimately, if like you're explaining like you're 5 and explain to a 5-year-old what's going on, you're like, the 5-year-old will see people at computers, people talking to each other in meetings and sending emails, and fulfilling just, I have made this PowerPoint to explain the progress of a project. Or there's a whole body like big that's not going away anytime soon of people that are in front of laptops writing code and meeting to talk about their code.
Yeah.
There's a lot of those.
Yeah.
And so whether you're studying, or the other 2 branches, I was going to say, because in France there's 3 main branches. So there's all the technical jobs, but then if you're, I think that's changed now, because I think you can have electives, but there's like the business side, literary and arts, and science. And as we said earlier, you could be studying chemistry and not do, you can still go and get it. Most of the people are going to get jobs in an office doing PowerPoint slides or possibly coding. And again, not a bad thing, just you will have to train for a certain amount of things. And then there's a lot of the people that I think there are less than there used to be doing arts. They're not going to be artists. Some will, possibly, but you're not studying arts to be an artist. You're studying arts for the general education that it provides you, and you'll find a job, whatever you can find. Also, whether you're in high school or even for a lot of people that are going to university, they just don't know.
Yeah.
Some people know they want to be a vet. Some people know they want to be a doctor.
Yep.
That's great. And I'm sure I've said this before on some other episode. I can't remember which one. So then I guess the further point is the concern behind the question about possibly it might be about what do I choose, depending on what do I choose to study, depending on where I want to go, or if I know where I want to go or not. And that's a more tricky question.
Because I think there are 2 concerns behind the question. One is about having enough money to live, and the other one is, how do I know when I found something that I want to do? How do I know? Will I like it? What if I don't like it? Oh my God, am I stuck? I think there's that whole thing.
Yeah.
And the whole, nobody really knows. You kind of got to, and that goes back to the whole thing about self-awareness and knowing yourself and what you're good at. Yeah. But I want to introduce another little thing, which is, I've heard my 10-year-old nephew and even my 6-year-old nephew saying, yeah, I could be a YouTuber. I wonder if because you got nieces and nephews, right? Have they said anything like that?
Not yet. And the way they're raised, they're probably unlikely to just yet. They're not raised with a lot of screen time. They do have some screen time, but and they're still young.
Because I do wonder if because I'm thinking back, when I was younger, did I know what I wanted to do as a career? No,
but there's a lot more that I did. So being an influencer was not something I ever thought about, because it didn't exist as a word.
Yeah.
I want to be an influencer. You're like, what?
I haven't heard anybody say influencer. I've heard people say YouTuber.
Okay. I've heard influencer.
Have you? I've heard people say, like, I could quite easily just go and get 1,000 followers or views on whatever social media, just like that. I could.
I have some of my students who are.
Oh,
well,
wow.
they have big audiences but they're also realizing that it's probably, it's not gonna pay their whole rent and everything else they want to do, and they probably need some other kind of job as well.
Yeah.
Possibly. Or you realize that, it is very difficult to build an audience. It's really, really time consuming.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of people trying to do the same thing.
Yeah.
A lot, like really, 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 really many people, that it's difficult to comprehend just how many hours of content are uploaded to YouTube every second, including ours. I'm like, of course we're not getting a lot of views. I'm barely spending any time promoting it.
Yeah.
And it's entirely possible that it could spend 10 times more time promoting it. I would not get 10 times more people watching at all.
Yeah. Yeah. And I stumbled across some article that the highest paid YouTuber is that kid who does toy reviews.
He's been at it for a while.
Yeah.
He's been doing that for 10 years.
And then the younger, certainly there are some people I teach who think, they could just do that, just like that.
Yeah. Are they doing it?
Well, that's what I say to them. I did challenge one of my pupils. Go on then, go do it. Go, you could go start up something by yourself. You don't even need to do anything. Go do it. And they don't. And my joke is, I say to them, if you go on to be billionaires, millionaires, all I want is 0.1% of your annual profit as a gift.
That's awesome.
That's all. As a gift in recognition of the memorable, amazing teaching you've had from me. So, who knows? Maybe one of them will come through one day and I'll just have a big pool.
You never know. Maybe.
I like to think so.
It's cool.
So we're coming towards the end of our time. I do want to show you this book.
Nice.
Now, my mum bought me this, and the cynic in me says my mum bought me this because she thinks I don't switch off. She thinks I work too hard. She thinks I don't get enough rest, all that kind of stuff. It's a very, very interesting book.
Oh, cool.
Really interesting book. There is one section in there. I was just reading it before we went live, the contents. The reason I think it would appeal to you is because there's a section in there called Deep, Deep Play.
Uh-huh.
And one of the things I started to do is, so he talks about rest. He talks about sleep, routines, walking, and he uses lots of examples of famous people, what they've done. And I've started to integrate walking. On Thursday, I went for a morning walk with my coffee around the park near where I live. And then I came back and started teaching. And I noticed my brain just starting to unravel itself in a good way. And I go for walks with my wife, but it's a different experience. Walking by myself, it was really nice. It was really nice. So on Friday,
I do a lot of walking by myself because I am by myself.
But I wish I could do more. So on Friday, I went for a morning walk and an afternoon walk, and I slept better Friday night.
How long did you walk for?
20 minutes, half an hour. Yeah, it wasn't very long. And I came back and I had more ideas. So
yeah, walking's great.
I was really surprised about it. There's one study in the book that it isn't where you walk, because even if they had participants in the study walking on treadmills in a room, and that still made a difference to their performance on a creativity task afterwards. So really interesting book.
Cool.
And what book are you currently?
So I'm reading Thinking Fast and Slow, and I'm finishing the volume 9 of the Sandman series, the Kindly Ones.
How many in that series?
This is the biggest one. There's 10 in total of the Neil Gaiman run on the Sandman, which is beautiful. This is beautiful graphic novels, like really, really gorgeous.
I have a feeling I would like it.
It's really awesome. It's that whole run is gorgeous. Do you know anything about this? It's like it's legendary in terms of graphic novels.
No,
it's really beautiful.
I know him. I don't know. I haven't read any of his stuff, but I don't know.
So the Sandman. This is from the 90s, I believe. The Sandman was an old DC character of the golden age, like in whenever that was, 40s, 50s, 1940s, 50s, or something. Mm-hmm. Anyway, Neil Gaiman took it and made it into something else. Cool. He made the Sandman into he created a pantheon of what's called the endless, I think, and they're anthropomorphized concepts.
So
And siblings.
anthropomorphized.
So the Sandman is Dream.
Aha.
So
Okay.
and their siblings are Dream, who commands on everything to do with Dream, and Sleep, who's the main character, but also with other characters associated. And the pantheon, pantheon is sort of, because they're not gods either. They're like, we're not gods. We're just here. We're concepts. They all start with a D, and they're siblings. And they have things going on between each other. So there's Dream, Destiny, Death, Destruction, Desire, Despair, and Delirium.
Ooh.
And each volume of the 10 is a different self-contained story, and just beautiful at that. With a different, so the same author, Neil Gaiman, but different artists. So the drawings are always different in style, which is kind of cool. That's
interesting.
But with the same characters, which is kind of confusing and interesting as well.
That's very interesting. Okay. I might have to look at that, because I was reading, I'll show you. Oh, actually, you'll love this. I got this as a Christmas present from my sister and her boyfriend.
Oh, cool. I was wondering about the graphic novel version.
And that's volume 1, so I'm going to have to read all the others. But
I didn't even know there was multiple volumes. I knew it was coming out as a graphic novel, but
I didn't know there was multiple volumes until I was on a call with our friend Adam. But the graphic novel I've been reading is this.
I wondered about that. I heard it's awesome, and I was browsing it before Christmas, and I almost bought it. It's one of the. When I finish what I'm reading now, I have the new version of Akira. There's a new print.
Okay.
I have read it back in the past. Of course, that's a gorgeous one. My brother got for Christmas a huge manga, which looks like it's like this thick. It's an autobiography of Tezuka, and Tezuka is one of he's the oldest, biggest mangaka. So he did like Astro Boy is him, and that's old.
Okay.
Like that's from ages ago. And Blackjack is one of his bigger characters as well. And
Preacher.
Preacher. Tell me, that looks amazing. I'm hesitating to read. I'd like to read either Preacher or Doom Patrol. That looks really crazy. And maybe I don't know, something else.
I think the reason I like Preacher is because it's it's completely ridiculous. It's so offensive, but such an interesting concept at the beginning of the whole idea of it.
I watched the first 2 episodes of the TV show, and then I thought, okay, I need to read the book rather than the TV show.
I've seen season 1, and I think I've nearly finished season 2. They've done a really good job.
Yeah.
It doesn't quite follow the same timeline, the same ideas, but they've done it really well. They've really got the essence of what he's saying in it. And I think he was involved in it. The writer creator was involved in the TV series. But certainly this year, I think this teaching tangents should be about as much about what we're reading and consuming and thinking about as answering the questions.
Yeah, sure. I mean, it can be, but it's like you see, answering and discussing the question almost takes us an hour every time. So I don't know. Yeah,
it'll work. We can make it work.
Sure.
Oh, so my recommendation to you is Rest by Alex Soo-Jung Kim-Pang, and your recommendation is Neil Gaiman's Sandman series.
Yep.
And so when I'm reading graphic novels, it's a complete thing, like 10 books. Is it?
So it's 10 books. You can start with the first one. Each story is self-contained but follows the same chronology.
Okay.
If that
I don't like
sense.
Graphic novels that just go on and on and on with no ending.
No, there's an end. There's like the 10 volumes is the run he did.
Okay, great, cool.
As far as I know, I think there's a few other small stories with side characters that exist, but I'll tell you when I'm finished with it. But I don't know that there's a proper end. But each one is so you could buy the first volume, read it, and see if you want to buy the second. You don't have to,
Oh, I see. Okay. I can be a bit of a completist, so we'll see.
No, me too. That's why I wanted the 10 volumes, and it's celebrated as one of the best in history.
What, like up there with Watchmen?
Yeah, but different because it's a 10-volume series, and it's not one story really.
Okay, I see.
So whereas the Watchmen is like one, and I actually found a YouTube channel called Near Mint Condition with a lot of graphic novel stuff, and I watched one episode about the top 10 single contained graphic novels. So Watchmen is in there, and I learned about a few others that I didn't know about that I like noted to put on my list to read.
Ooh.
Number one is Mouse. That was not surprising. Have you read Mouse?
Really? Yeah, I know Mouse.
Yeah, I mean
I
that's
didn't
kind
know
of
that.
like
Really? I thought Watchmen might have been number one.
Yeah, but Mouse is just so. I think it's still important, and it's great to be reading that in graphic novel form, and it makes the story of what happened in the show so much more accessible to others and to younger readers as well. Teenage, probably not kids. But.
Great. Okay. Well, today's question was, could I study one thing and then get a completely different job? Next week, we'll be back with another question from another student, maybe one of yours, maybe one of mine. This one was from one of mine.
Okay.
I'm going to be collecting questions this week. So,
Cool.
Yeah, leave a comment with questions, leave a comment with feedback, and tell your friends about this.